Do you want to add more realism to your coloring? Have you practiced and yet your coloring projects still don't look realistic? Today, we're talking about the most overlooked key to realism. Beginner coloring classes are all about blending. How to blend two markers together, which colors to choose for the best blends, and how to apply those inks, and which strokes make for the smoothest, silkiest color gradations. Blending. It's a beginner's approach to coloring. Later, as we get to the upper level tutorials and classes, we learn how to choose specific color combinations to create the illusions of depth and dimension. Depth and dimension. You hear these words a lot in the coloring world. Depth and dimension are sold as the secrets to realism. If you can just get enough depth and create enough dimension in your projects, then everything you color will look just like a photograph. Really? How's that idea working out for you? Because I teach mostly intermediate to advanced coloring classes, I meet a lot of students who are frustrated. They've read all the articles, and they've done all the blog tutorials for depth. They've taken the classes which promise dimension. They've practiced and practiced and practiced, and yet they're still not getting the kind of realism they dream about. Nothing looks real. And so they blame themselves. Because after this much practice, if things still don't look realistic, maybe it's your fault. Maybe you're just not talented enough to create real-looking projects. But wait, hold on a minute. With all of these advanced tutorials and challenge level projects you've been practicing, are you still blending like a beginner? Take a moment to look at the world around you. Stop this video. Look at the room that you're sitting in right now. That's real life. That's reality. You're looking at realism. The thing you're trying to capture in your coloring projects, it surrounds you all the time. Realism looks like the real world. And in this real room around you, how many things are smooth? Maybe the top of your desk is super smooth, and the screen you're viewing this video on, that's definitely smooth. But almost everything else has texture. The world is full of texture. My chair is a pebbled leather. The throw pillow is a springy woven cotton. The side table has a light glossy wood grain. The floor is covered with fibrous carpet. Even my coffee mug has a texture. It's a hard, brittle ceramic. And yet the average Copic colorer would color all of these things the same exact way, blending them all smooth. That's the thing that's missing from your coloring, realistic texture. Texture is a vital element of realism. You can have all the depth and dimension in the world, but if you're smoothing everything out into a perfect blend, it's not going to look real. It's going to look artificial, fake, plastic. Texture adds reality. Now I know, as soon as I say texture, you start thinking about colorless blender techniques. You take a washcloth and you soak it in colorless blender and dab that on your project for texture, right? Well, okay, but that's a novelty technique. There are lots of colorless blender techniques that you can play with when you get bored with blending. But has any of that stuff really looked real? Probably not. There's only so much you can do with solvent. It may make a teddy bear look a little more fuzzier than usual, but it doesn't instantly make the teddy bear look lifelike and three-dimensional. So let's ditch the idea of adding realism with unrealistic colorless blender texture. I'm talking about adding real-looking texture. I want you to start thinking deeper about your projects. Think in adjectives. Think in terms of feel. Is your object hard or soft? Is it gritty or silky? Is it wet or dry, woven or gathered or pleated or scratchy or sticky or whatever it is? What makes this thing feel different from everything else in the world? For my bottle of tonic here, before I started coloring, even before I drew the bottle, I stopped to think. I told myself a story. Where did this bottle of tonic come from? Well, I certainly didn't get it off the shelf at Walmart. No, I found this bottle hidden behind a stack of books in an antique shop. I don't think the shop owner even knew it was there. The label was worn and watermarked, maybe even a little stained from years of handling. If I blended this label smooth, it's going to look like something that just rolled off the assembly line at a factory. So how about the cap? My bottle of tonic is really old. I bet I'm not the first person to own this bottle. It's been passed around for years. It has a cork, not a screw cap, and that cork is worn and dented from years of use. So if I blend this cork out smooth, it's going to look like a plastic plug. How about the tonic itself? I'm sure this is dangerous stuff because the liquid keeps fizzing. Every time I shake the bottle, it bubbles up a little bit more, and it's a slightly viscous, thick, sticky liquid. It clings a bit to the side of the bottle. If I blended this liquid smooth, it's gonna look like green Kool-Aid. These little stories that I tell myself about the antique shop and the fizzing, they guide my hands when I'm coloring. They provide little details that make the objects feel real. So now I can search the internet for antique parchment, I can look at old corks, and I can look for fizzy green drink textures. Once I understand what something feels like, then I can decide what it looks like, and then that tells me what to do with my markers and my colored pencils. The room around you is full of objects, and every one of those objects has a story, where you got it, where it's been, what it's been used for. Tell us that story with your marker strokes. Show us that story with your colored pencils. Think before you blend. What would you say if I gave you a rubber teddy bear? Would it bring back fond childhood memories of the soft fuzzy bear you loved when you were a kid? Would you cuddle with this smooth rubber plasticky cold bear? Would you even call it a teddy bear? And yet that's exactly what you do when you blend a teddy bear drawing smooth. You're handing someone a rubber bear and asking them to pretend that it looks like a real fuzzy bear. Real life isn't rubber. Realism isn't smooth. Depth and dimension are important. I'm not saying you should abandon the efforts to color with dimension. Real objects have depth, they have dimension, they have light and shade and even shadow. But they also have texture. And when you ignore that texture, when you blend everything smooth, you're smoothing away the reality. The key to adding more realism to your projects isn't always what you do with your hands. It's also what you do with your mind. When your projects look real, it's because someone sees your coloring and they say, yes, that feels right. That looks right. I've seen that before. To make that connection with people, you have to be connected with the world around you. Automatically blending everything, that's a disconnect because the real world is chock full of texture. Give it a try. Start looking around. Become a careful observer. Think beyond the marker blend. Color things as they feel. Greater realism is right at your fingertips. The key to realism is all around you. Every day, everywhere you go, you can reach right out and touch it. Put the texture back into your coloring. Texture is real.